It wouldn't be the first time you got a little bit of hate, would it?
Nope.
So I wonder if you're alluding to the idea of everyone is a designer.
Yeah, of course. Everyone's a designer and everyone's a researcher.
What
And
do you think about that?
democratization and decentralization, they're both part of the same problem. I think, again, the people who sold that to everyone are unemployable, they're retired, they sell books and templates and workshops and get speaking engagements, and they want to stay in the game. What they're doing to do that is they're telling businesses, more than businesses, they're telling chief product officers and chief technical officers what they want to hear. They're playing 100% into their already ardent biases against research and creativity. They're telling people things like, to say that you're creative or that you have a craft or a practice is a bad word. None of those things are bad. They're saying it's ridiculous, and they're actually making fun, being disrespectful to researchers and designers. And they're saying, why do you treat design as if it's part of your identity? No one else does. It's because it is. And most other jobs aren't. You want to know why I'm saying that? Because to be a designer, to be a writer, like you were talking about, to design these things and create things and bring things into the world, you had to have learned a formula of failing and garnering wisdom from that failure a whole lot as a child. Your DNA matters. So what you garnered, what you took away from your mom and dad at birth, and your early childhood development, all of that dictates what you're going to do and how you're going to do things later in life. And things like applied mathematics, applied science, and many of the other tools and trades are learned from mimicry and memorization. That's a fact. I didn't invent that. That's not my idea. That's science. But a lot of what designers and creatives do, and rock stars and musicians and painters and poets, it is 100% our DNA in our early childhood development. And most of them also were neurodivergent. That's a fact too. They had some form of autism, ADHD. And so what we're really doing underneath all of that is we're really a bunch of neuro bigots in business right now. That's what's happening. Is you're like, oh, these guys are wacky. Yeah, they're too creative. And the way that they do it is kind of like what they did in Nazi Germany and a lot of other places, is they're like, show me how there's metrics to support what you're talking about. And that's the trope, and that's the trap right there. And the thing is, so much of what we do is phenomenon, and you can't tell them that. You can't say, that there are plenty of things that are like cognitive biases or logical fallacies. We don't understand why these things happen. This is why we introduced the notion of system one and system two thinking, is this idea that we can catch them and we can prevent from being biased. And the thing is no, you can't. Those things are deep seated and they're in your subconscious. It's great that we can identify them, but most people, I don't care what your level of critical thinking or your IQ is, they can't decipher on the front end before they do something that's biased, right? So that's one of the things that I find, interesting, is they think everything has to have a measurable metric so that they can manage it. If you were to explain to them, there's hundreds of things you can explain in the way of phenomenon. One of my favorite ones is mass psychogenic illness. How do you explain that? How do you explain the phenomenon of like groupthink and people going crazy? A soccer game sets off. Everybody loves football in European countries. Your favorite team wins. All of a sudden, they're burning down the city and destroying cop cars and killing each other. And you're like, dude, aren't you happy? You just won. Manchester United just won. Why are you burning down London? People are just easily pliable, and they have like really simple minds. And you can't explain that. You can't explain what happened at the Salem witch trials. You can't explain like people all reporting seeing certain things that, you're like, come on, you don't have a picture of that. And you're saying, something was flying around and you saw it. And so you can't explain that kind of stuff unless you explain it away and refer to it as mental illness or people lying, but they're not lying. They believe what they're saying. Yeah. And so if they believe what they're saying, I think we need to investigate that more. You need to investigate things like, and really understand how you or I could walk through a parking lot, see a guy with a hoodie on, and describe it to an illustrator who sits down and draws their face out and draws the exact face of the Zodiac killer. What was the one in the 80s and the Night Stalker? Ramirez. If you go look at the sketch artist did of him, it's
Hmm.
crazy close. Like it's identical to him. How do you explain that? What's the metric around me talking to you and you pulling a pad out and you drawing someone that you've never seen before and I only saw for 30 seconds?
Yeah.
How do you explain that? You can't. And there's a million things like that that we do all day, every day. And what you don't want to say ever in front of a linear thinking adapter is you never want to say, you know what? The difference between a company that works and one that doesn't is good taste. And some people have it and some people don't. You never want to say that because then they'll throw their hands up in the air and go, oh, what are you talking about? It's got to be learnable. This is what Teresa Torres and all these guys are selling. They're selling that everything is teachable, and it isn't. The very best researchers I've ever met weren't necessarily PhDs. Some of them were just kick-ass journalists or philosophers, or they were great at marketing, and they just sort of kept gravitating towards it because they loved it and they were good at it and they were inquisitive and they knew how to ask great questions and they loved people enough to be present with them and to active listen and nod their head. And especially in my field, I'm in healthcare, man. I have been on calls with people who are dying, and I've actually talked to people who later died. And I've talked to people about their significant others or their family members who lost their life. I've done a bunch of stuff for legal cases for like Johnson and Johnson and Monsanto. And you're talking to people who are in wheelchairs and they've got oxygen and their hair's falling out. You have to be able to speak to people on a certain human level. And the dude who writes your C++ or your jQuery and JavaScript isn't the guy to do that.
Right. That makes sense. We covered a lot of different stuff. Whew, we could spend hours unpacking a lot of this stuff.
It's
But
incendiary. I'm going to get in trouble. You're going to get a lot of you're going to get a lot of clicks, and I'm going to get a lot of hate.
well, as it goes, right? As it goes. It wouldn't be the first time you got a little bit of hate, would it?
Nope.
Check out all my interviews with industry leaders on BlatzChatz.